confession to make. I have fallen in love with the whole world. Here's how it happened. I was born in a tiny country in Northern Europe called Estonia, and as long as I can remember, I've always admired, even been envious of people who have had the opportunity to live in 2 or more countries, or whose parents are from different parts of the world. I always thought to myself, how rich their lives must be, to be able to navigate 2 or more cultures, to be able to speak fluently in 2 or more languages. Naturally, when I had the opportunity to study abroad, I did. When I had the opportunity to work abroad, I did. In fact, I ended up living in 6 different countries over the last 6 years, and traveled to many more. And boy, I fell in love with the whole world. Throughout those 6 years, I learned a few things about this world. In England, I learned to drink tea with milk. In Poland, I learned just how much a different country can feel like home. In Singapore, I learned how it transformed from a third world country into a first world country in just 3 decades. In Indonesia, I studied about Islam, and I learned what it's like to be a minority. Most recently, I learned that a lot of Americans are stereotypically loud and talkative. And I probably became more loud and talkative in the learning process myself. My biggest lesson, though, has been in coming to an understanding of how to balance being global and being local. In the last few decades, there's been a lot of talk about globalization. Various definitions claim that today's technologies have created flows that are global, flows of ideas, people, goods, and capital, and that these flows are pervasive and unimpeded. In fact, it's enticing to think about anything global. As the anthropologist Anna Tsing explains, it draws our enthusiasm because it helps us imagine the world as interconnected. The rhetoric that's often used claims that the world is in the beginning of a new era where circulation and flows overcome all restrictions and boundaries. Anna Tsing also explains that this rhetoric has created a fantasy of a globalized world. That is not to say that those global flows do not exist, but rather it cautions us to consider whether they exist to the extent that we're led to believe, and whether it's actually meaningful to think in those terms. In fact, 95% of us today are not migrants, and more than 90% of all capital investments, phone calls, and internet traffic is local. That is, it happens within the borders of a nation-state. And I think the rest 10% is probably my friends and family around the world watching this live stream right now. What I've come to understand is that global and local are not opposites that need to be balanced. In fact, they exist on the same continuum, where on the one end lie the social and economic relationships that are organized on a local or national level, and on the other end lie the networks that crystallize through global and regional flows. With the development of internet and other technologies, the global flows and networks have definitely intensified, but they in no way replace or diminish the value of the local networks. In this context of the globalization rhetoric, it's very enticing to think of myself as a world citizen just because I've lived here and there. In fact, a study named Glocalities by a Dutch firm called Motivaction surveyed more than 48,000 people around the world. And what they found was that as many as 37% of today's so-called millennials consider themselves more a world citizen than a citizen of the country that they live in. Now, not only is this a great example of buying into the globalization rhetoric, but it's also a great example of how often local and global are portrayed as mutually exclusive opposites when they're not. I do consider myself a world citizen, but I'm also Estonian by nationality, and I've spent the last year invested in the community of Savannah, Georgia. Oh, and thanks for coming to my going away party today, because I have a flight to Boston tomorrow. So when I say I'm a world citizen, what it really means to me is that I'm invested in both the local and the global networks. And when I say I've fallen in love with the world, what I really mean is that I've fallen in love with the different locations and the diversity of the world. The global flows of ideas, people, capital, and goods will not make this world any more interconnected unless we embrace them on a local, especially personal level. If we are to make the most of this powerful fantasy of a globalized world, let us fall in love with our world first, by getting to know the neighbor who's from the other side of the globe, by trying out different world cuisines or learning new languages, by traveling far away from your comfort zone, by welcoming into your lives diversity and anything that's foreign. Fall in love with the world. I believe that the world will become a smaller, friendlier, and better place for it. Thank you.